Africa is not poor, the global myth that keeps us dependent, a myth exposed, a continent reclaimed. Africa is poor. That's the line, right? That's what they've drilled into textbooks, slapped across NGO campaigns, and fed into the bloodstream of global consciousness. Turn on Western media and you'll see it. Children with bloated bellies, cracked earth, mud huts, and hopeless faces, narrated by a somber voice asking for donations. But let's be very clear. This isn't a continent lacking wealth. It's a continent whose wealth is systematically stolen, misrepresented, and buried beneath centuries of lies. In this video, we're going to tear the myth apart, piece by piece, because until Africa reclaims its truth, it will never reclaim its power. 1. The poverty propaganda machine. Let's start with the image of Africa you were sold. It begins in childhood. School books show starving African children. Charity ads beg for donations. Celebrities hold brown babies like accessories. Africa becomes one giant village of suffering in the global imagination. This is not accidental. It's strategic. Why? Because if Africa is seen as hopeless, then 1. Aid becomes charity, not reparations. 2. Exploitation becomes partnership. 3. Resource theft becomes development. 4. Military bases become peacekeeping missions. By branding Africa as poor, the West justifies its continued dominance, its control over African economies, and its narrative monopoly. The real poverty? It's in the global understanding of Africa's reality. 2. The real numbers they don't want you to know. Let's hit you with some hard truths. 1. Africa holds 60% of the world's arable land, and yet it imports food. 2. Africa possesses 30% of the world's mineral reserves, including 90% of global platinum, 70% of tantalite, 50% of cobalt, and vast amounts of gold, diamonds, and oil. 3. The Democratic Republic of Congo alone has mineral wealth estimated at over $24 trillion, yet it ranks among the poorest nations. 4. African countries contribute billions annually to the global economy through cheap labor, raw material exports, and corporate tax evasion structures. So where is the disconnect? 3. Foreign aid, the Trojan horse. 4. Let's talk about foreign aid, the West's favorite guilt cleanser. It's always the same story. We give aid to help Africa. But here's what's not said. 1. For every $1 the West gives in aid, $24 is extracted in return through resource plundering, illicit financial flows, debt repayments, and tax avoidance. 2. Most aid is tied aid, meaning it must be spent on products or services from the donor country. 2. It's a circular donation. They give with one hand and take more with the other. 3. NGOs and foreign contractors get the lion's share of aid, not African communities. Aid isn't help. It's a PR campaign for exploitation, wrapped in the language of compassion. As Dambisa Moyo said, aid has become a tool for keeping African dependent and politically manipulated. Now let's look at the role of the media. When the West shows Africa, it shows crisis, corruption, chaos. Rarely do they show 1. Africa's booming tech hubs like Nairobi's Silicon Savannah. 2. The rise of youth-led innovation and art movements. 3. The $6.7 trillion value of Africa's diaspora contributions. 4. Our fashion, our music, our literature, our architecture. Why? Because a thriving Africa doesn't serve the global hierarchy. A hopeless Africa justifies control. It makes people feel superior. It keeps donations flowing. And worst of all, it teaches Africans themselves to see their continent as cursed. Media doesn't just reflect reality. It manufactures it. 5. Who's really poor? 2. Now let's flip the lens. The West, particularly Europe and North America, relies on Africa's wealth to survive. Their industries run on African resources. Their tech is built on African minerals. Their financial systems are propped up by African debt repayments and low-wage labor. What would happen if Africa stopped exporting raw materials tomorrow? So who is really dependent on whom? They need our gold, our cobalt, our oil, our diamonds. They need our mines, our labor, our silence. We don't need theirs. 6. The hidden Africa. Innovation, culture, and power. Beneath the rubble of distortion lies the real Africa. 1. Young people coding apps to solve local problems. 2. Farmers using drone tech to revolutionize agriculture. 3. Musicians, filmmakers, and thinkers shaping global culture. 4. Pan-African thinkers reviving indigenous governance models. 5. Communities resisting imperial systems and building from the ground up. Africa is not waiting to be saved. Africa is already rising, but that rise is deliberately obscured. Why? Because if the world knew Africa's true power, they'd realize that the so-called Third World has always been the First World, in resources, culture, resilience, and potential. 7. So why does the myth persist? Simple. Control. If the world believes Africa is poor, it 1. Delegitimizes African demands for justice. 2. Prevents calls for reparations or systemic change. 3. Keeps African youth looking outward instead of inward. 4. Maintains dependency, psychologically and economically. And most sinister of all, it divides Africans against themselves, urban versus rural, Anglophone versus Francophone, diaspora versus continent, keeping us too distracted to realize our collective strength. The truth that liberates. So here's the truth. Africa is not poor. It is plundered, misrepresented, silenced. The continent that gave the world civilization, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and architecture is now painted as a basket case. That lie must end. We are not beggars. We are not burdens. We are the backbone of the global economy, and it's time we act like it. It starts with reclaiming our narrative, telling our own stories, teaching our children the truth, supporting African enterprise, challenging the myths ruthlessly, because the most revolutionary act in a world built on lies is to tell the truth about Africa.